book of Revelation. I preached for 23 years, every single Sunday. I preached the lectionary, the 3-year cycle. I preached it all the way through more than 7 times. And never once, not once, did I preach on the book of Revelation. The book actually appears in the lectionary just in this one year, the 3rd year, year C. It appears as a series after Easter. So there's a 5-week series that we can devote to studying this book of Revelation that I studiously avoided all these years. I think that I might still studiously avoid this book, except that this book is so incredibly relevant for the toxicity of those who have chosen to use it. So while many of us who have more progressive or liberal or even mainline views have avoided this text, people who have more conservative and hawkish worldview have picked this text up and owned it and are using it to literally create an end times scenario. This book matters, even if I don't particularly care for it. Towards the end, what we know is that by the time that it was written, it had to be at least 60 years post the death of Jesus. It was well past the Jewish revolt, and the Roman authority had come down, destroyed the temple. The people were, the tyranny just became so much worse. You know, they really felt as though they were living in an end times scenario. Not surprisingly, apocalyptic literature, this kind of literature, the genre in which Revelation finds itself, became very popular. It's very fanciful, imaginative, lots of allegory and symbolism, and lots of talk about the end of the world as we know it. Which was this sense of the end of the world as we know it feels incredibly relevant today. It feels relevant as we watch the taproots of our nation's most original sins literally eat this nation alive. And as we watch our human capacity to destroy the earth itself upon which we depend. So this kind of anxiety in this text, this kind of pessimism in this text becomes particularly relevant then, and I would suggest now. And I have to tell you that as a queer person with trans offspring and a multiracial family, I got to tell you that living in the United States right now feels incredibly tenuous and dangerous and terrifying in ways that I could not have anticipated even 5 years ago. I feel myself facing that cataclysmic precipice to which Revelation would be relevant. The dominant view of this text comes from the work of Scofield, who lived in the late 19th century. He was a conservative evangelical during that Great Awakening wave of literal biblical thinkers. He had a particular interest in the book of Revelation, drew all kinds of charts and definitions of the allegories and symbols, and so he claimed to have cracked the code of the book of Revelation. And of particular note is that a couple decades ago, Tim and Beverly LaHaye, they took this Revelation work and commissioned and worked together with some folks to create a fiction series in which tied current world leaders and events to this allegorical tale. Specifically, they tied the United States and Russia and the Middle East into a end of the world war incredibly awful scenario. The series, called Left Behind, I think is 3 books, and I think there were 3 movies, hugely popular. One of the best-selling books of the early 21st century. amazing. And the biblical scholarship used in the book was Schofield's. I would point out that we would be, again, remiss to dismiss it, because not only is it hugely popular generally among people who call themselves Christian, it is incredibly significant for those who sit in the White House. Remember that White House Bible study, that cabinet Bible study? You know, Betsy DeVos and all her friends, they all get together for that Bible study. This is the stuff they're learning. The people who are advising the president on whether to go to war and whom to go to war with and how hawkish to be ascribe to this theology. So pay attention. It matters. While we have been taught to read Revelation as a prediction of future events, I believe that this text is much more relevant to us as a choice between two ways of being in this world today. It's an invitation to recognize that there are really two paths. There's the way of the world, if you will, with the Roman Empire, with the homage we are to pay to the white capitalist patriarchy, that killing machine that is destroying us from the inside out, or there is the way of Jesus, to embody and live the teachings that he embodied and lived. So we have a choice whether to acquiesce to the regime that claims to own us, or to resist, because the way is a way of resistance. We're at that fork in the road. That's the essence, I believe, of the book of Revelation. The juxtaposition of the regime that we are confronted with and this incredible vision of the way is really, I think, the point, the juxtaposition, right? If this is not about what happens after we die, if this is not a pre-death, post-death, if this is rather about a way in which we are going to engage and live in this world, right? This text could not be more timely for us. Some of the details, I think, are really rich, and the symbolism invites us to really consider things in a new way. For instance, the city is gold. The city is gold not because there is a heavenly after-death reward with golden city streets, but because the way of Jesus is precious, as gold is precious. So you have a choice between the ugliness of this world and something so very precious. It's interesting, too, that there is no temple in this way, right? Because in the regime, you need a temple to draw attention to anything sacred because it gets lost in the rubble and the madness of the regime. But in the way, when we are all at one together with the source of our being, there is no need for temples. My personal favorite is the river and the tree of life by the river. So this tree of life is producing food all year, so the people who have joined in the way will have abundant food to eat. There will be enough for everybody, all the time, through every season, when we choose to live in the way. If we embraced the promises of the New Jerusalem, we would indeed have experienced, quite literally, heaven on earth. It's an incredibly beautiful invitation. And it's nothing short of revolutionary. I don't choose to believe that these passages written way back in the late 1st or early 2nd century were intended to be a carrot to keep us loyal to the systems that grind us to death in hopes of some afterlife eternal reward. I don't think that's what they were about. I don't think that's what they were about then, and I don't think that has any relevance now. And quite frankly, I think that's really a dangerous theological frame. I'm going to be judgy there, but I think it's problematic. Bottom line, we get to choose not only which texts that we read and which ones we avoid, like I've studiously avoided this one for a quarter century, we also get to decide how we're going to read them. We can read them with 19th century wacko literalism, but why would we, right? Or we can choose to engage in the text with the best of our literary and critical skills and, quite frankly, some logic and some healthy suspicion. When we do, we discover that these texts are not only relevant in that they're used against us routinely, and they're used right now to make the drumbeat for war, but they're also relevant in inspiring us about taking the next right step today. They're also relevant in helping us to see the choice we have to either be complicit with this regime or make the choice to resist. It's a choice that we make every single day. With every decision that we make, we are either casting our net with the regime or following in the way. And nothing could be more relevant or timely